All right. Can you introduce yourself at the tape?
Of course, my name is Dorian Johnson. I go by the Phuncle, Public Health Uncle, and I'm a public health educator and health communicator in Long Island, New York. I believe that education for health should be skills based and focused to help people while we also work upstream to change systems, giving them something they can do now while we work towards better outcomes.
I love that. It's so you have to tell me the origin story of the Funkle. How did you become the Funkle?
Absolutely. So, I'm someone being one of the few Black men in public health. I felt as if my voice was something that was underrepresented in something I really didn't see like that. And I was like, huh, culturally, we got uncles. Like, we got Uncle Snoop, we got Uncle Charlie, we got uncles that really be looking out for their like young ones coming up after them. And there's a rich auntie, if you will, where it's the aunt is putting game to the nieces and like the young ones after them to help them avoid pitfalls and obstacles and things they don't really need to worry about if someone could just help them. And I was like, I like teaching, I like making it fun. PH, public health, Funkle. And honestly, my wife came up with that. So credit
Well,
to her always.
I love it. And tell me, you work out of Suffolk County, but you're also thinking both locally and also globally. And there's something about great communication which is free of scale, right? It doesn't really matter where you're doing it. The themes build off of each other. Can you give me a sense on, how did you fall into public health and really see yourself as a public health educator in terms of as a calling?
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is I didn't know public health was a discipline until I was 28 years old. So, with that, I actually thought I would be doing sociology, and my sociology professor was like, I know exactly what you want to do. I wrote your letter of recommendation for grad school, so I know where your goals are at. Have you heard of public health? And I said, what are you talking about? So, from there, I was really able to clearer than ever see, okay, it's not just health a sole responsibility as I've been led to think at one point. And coming from someone who was working on an individual level with personal training and then later group fitness, I was seeing trends and patterns emerge where people in specific zip codes, people in specific neighborhoods, they were all experiencing the same thing. And I was like, there's more to this. Like, I got to keep going upstream, and how can I kind of merge like that one-to-one individual with coaching and actionableness, for lack of a better term, with having them do stuff they can in the interim while we're like doing more upstream stuff. And I've gotten pretty good at educating by doing that. From like, every client is different from the next, even if it's the same problem, so to speak. So that is something that really guides my perspective and just my approach.
I really appreciate that. I want to before we talk about what goes right with how you communicate, it'd be helpful to step back and sort of understand from your perspective what goes wrong when we talk about communicating public health. What are the things that we continue to do wrong, we continue to miss when it comes to the way we talk about everything from vaccines to the kinds of preventive behaviors that we can all engage in?
Whew. Yeah, that is a very big one. Um, what I do feel something that does keep going wrong is assuming that trust is automatically given. And I feel like a lot of that is shielded behind what advanced degree you might have, or like if you're a doctor or any sort of thing that is always respectable. Like, people do work hard and invest a lot in their education and just creating this path for them. I do feel that is used as a crutch to where I have this amount of education, therefore you automatically respect me. And I feel like that could create discord, especially if it's someone who is coming from, let's say, not that community, or someone who is an outsider. It's just that assumption where trust is automatically given and not earned. And I feel like that is a big sticking point.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. So, as one of those people who used to always lead with, well, here are my degrees and here's all the education I have that you might not. I've come to appreciate that more importantly, people want to understand the things that are similar between us. And I think when you create that chasm between you and someone else that is based in degrees that you got to get, you miss that opportunity to connect on a basic level, right? People don't really want to know what my medical degree tells me they should do when it comes to vaccines. They want to know what my being a father to two daughters tells me I think they ought to do when it comes to vaccines. And I think that's the mistake that we so often miss. And then the other part of this is that there has been a concerted effort to turn those degrees against you, right? That there
Mhm.
is this idea that somehow there is this conspiracy of people who've gone to fancy educational institutions. Those folks are all trying to get you to do something that's not in your interest. So it's not even that the degree that you have buys you trust. It's that the degree that you have is going to be used against you to take away trust from you. And I think we're still operating in this environment where we forget that point. And then, there's another point that I think you're really good at understanding, which is that if you're not talking in stories, if you're not capturing somebody's attention because what you're saying is itself interesting to listen to and fun to be a part of, people are just going to swipe, right? You got to create content, and that's something you've done really well. You're really candid in the way that you show up on social media, and I want to ask you now that we've talked a little bit about what we get wrong. What have you found helps you get it right when you are communicating in broader, more public spaces in these ways?
Thank you for that, by the way. I appreciate that. One of the things I feel that I have been able to accomplish pretty well is being able to urge surf with seeing people just throwing out inflammatory or even just like combative language. If I post something, there is false equivalencies being drawn, there's people attacking me and my character. And I feel like the just inherent instinctive thing is to like bite back, but I don't. And I feel like I want to. And I feel it quite often, given a lot of the things and the stakes that go with the type of work that we're in. But I always just take a pause. I feel that urge. I have it get to the top. It crashes down. And then I'm in that space where I seek more clarification. I seek more understanding. So let's say I like post something and I kind of think I know where they're going. I just ask them again for clarification. So if I'm hearing this right, can you just like speak more about that? Or like, what does this look like? Tell me more. And a lot of times I allow them to share where I'm getting insights from that I feel like I wouldn't have gotten if I just like bit back or like punch down or like anything. And even if I still disagree, I feel like other commenters come in as well and like push or rally behind that initial comment where I'm like, it seems like a lot of people have this perspective too. And I think that's insight. Like, what can I do differently, or how could I adjust my message, or something like that, where I think that's a very big skill, just urge surfing
Mm.
when you see something like that.
What's interesting, what I hear you saying is that in order to do this well, you almost have to resist the incentive structure that's laid out for you by social media, right? Because so much of social media is geared toward figuring out how to maximize your emotional experience with the material in ways that leave us yelling at each other rather than speaking to each other. And it's almost like if you're going to be a super user in the way that you are, and too often I'm forced to be, you've really got to be able to sort of zen out of the ways that it's pushing you to behave and to be thinking about how you use the tools for your benefit and to move your message rather than the way the tool moves you to use it. And there's sort of a meta concept of like what is the implicit curriculum of social media. And I think the mistake that we often fall into is that the world is its extremes, that like you have the people who wholeheartedly agree with you or the people who wholeheartedly don't, because those are the only two folks you're fed information from, because those are the folks that are going to elicit the biggest surge of emotions and the neurotransmitters that follow them. And you almost have to keep your eye on like what's that silent middle, like that movable group of people who don't already agree with what I have to say or don't already vehemently disagree with what I have to say, who I can start to persuade and to engage with. And it's important, right? Because if you want to do this well, you almost cannot consume the material the way that it's intended to be consumed, or you fall into the mistakes that too many folks end up making, and you start speaking in extremes because that's the implicit curriculum of this thing. And you talked about urge surfing. Like I'm wondering how much social media do you consume, or how do you consume it as somebody who creates it regularly?
Yeah. Oh man, I am chronically online. I feel like I shouldn't be. I feel like I should step back, for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. When it comes to when I end up creating and how that like diverges from like how I consume things, I primarily look for trends or trending sounds, and generally they have formats. Like if there was something, it's generally following something where I plug in a public health scenario, or I plug in a perspective of something that I think should be amplified to make it more visible. So like I guess on my seeking as like I'm consuming mode, I see what is out there and then I try and bring it back to public health. And when it goes to creating, I also kind of am like, what is something that I feel someone might need to hear? And are there any trends that kind of like overlap with this right now that I could leverage for like some reach or some visibility? And I try to keep it just like that. But design tricks and this and that, like I give myself time limits because I know I will stay on there way too long.
You're also somebody, though, who's focused in the local. How have your experiences in Suffolk changed the way that you create material? Is there a way in which you're sort of borrowing from the local space that you're in to better understand how things are going to move?
That's a good question. I will say like a lot of things that I do see locally inspire me to create something about it. Where right now on Long Island, there's been a huge uptick in just like ticks, specifically sightings, bites, whatnot. So I'm like, let's talk about tick safety. It's timely. It's like during the season. This is something that, yeah, I'm speaking to locally, but also people not in my same geographic area, it could still kind of remind them, yeah, tick stuff is important. I could also be susceptible. So I feel like a lot of things I see like on the ground are things that also influence me to create.
I want to give listeners sort of a sense of how you work. There's a couple of examples I want to bring to the fore. I want to play one now about STIs. I want folks to take a listen, and then we'll talk a little bit about it, why it worked, how you came up with it, and maybe folks who are out there talking about these issues, particularly in this moment now where we're watching, the Secretary of Health and Human Services weaponize against vaccines. Some of the insights here I think can be helpful. Let's take a listen.
Oral sex does not mean it's risk free. For example, did you know that you can get gonorrhea or chlamydia in the throat and you might not have symptoms? So that means you could pass it to other people because you don't even know you have it. And generally, you have to ask for a throat swab. There are other STIs that don't show symptoms in the genitals too. So no burning, no bumps, not itching, but could still be actively infected. So imagine you have active infection, aren't showing any symptoms, so you feel like you're fine, then have a sexual encounter. That's a possible transmission. And this is why routine testing is so important with every new partner, every couple months, throat swab included. Lastly, forget body count. Remember biology. Someone can have multiple partners and have no STIs. Someone can have one partner and get a STI. STIs only care about one thing, happen from one to the next. So how'd you do? Did you know these three? Share with someone who might need to hear this.
All right, so that video got 82,000 impressions. Can you give us a sense of what were you trying to move beyond? I hear that explicit piece on body count there, which is what people tend to think through. What were you trying to get folks to rethink about STIs?
Yeah. One, that it isn't primarily just front genitals and where like they could live, or even, the anus. Just I used to do STI testing, which kind of goes back to things that I've done which influence what I've created. And a lot of times in questionnaires, people were shocked, even where it's like, I didn't know that I had to get throat swabs as well. I didn't know that there was a risk to this. And up to a point, like in my own life and experience, I thought that way too. So a combination of this, the something that has cultural significance of just the concept of like a body count and what that means, and all that that could potentially symbolize. I feel like if that's a focus and a topic, what could I teach around that topic, especially something that people might not know, and like fusing those together. And that was like the intent behind that. Because even in the comments, there were people who were like, I had no idea. How could I ask my partner? I'm nerd like, and that leads to other more skills based health education that I could provide. And that's the main goal for me. But seeing just that like in and like leveraging a topic that already exists and also teaching.